very beginning, and you know, we're standing in Old Main, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. This is a building that was the first on this, physically on this campus.
Correct. Joseph Goodrich founded Milton Academy in 1844. Now this is, Wisconsin was still a territory. This was predates University of Wisconsin by 4 years, predates statehood by 4 years. He built his initial academy building down across from the Milton House, which he built and founded and is now a National Historic Landmark, and as being part of the Underground Railroad. Across from the Milton House, across the park, he built the original academy building. It was not a very substantial building. It was built out of grout, which is the same material that he used to build the Milton House. It's kind of a precarious way to build buildings,
right.
And within 10 years, that building had collapsed. So the college, meantime, was gaining enrollment and interest as more people came to the area. So Goodrich and his son and his son-in-law actually were responsible for building this building here on the main hall. It was called the Academy Hall at the time. In 1855, this was completed by. This would have been one of the largest buildings in
the area, not the region.
Exactly.
I'm going to speculate. Next door is the old science and library
Correct.
building, and it's also been restored, and it's now a coffee shop, and there's this athletic training facility and a residence, no less, in that building. When did that one come along?
We have 4 substantial buildings that were built as part of the Milton College campus. This was 1855 as Main Hall. It served a variety of purposes through its lifetime. Library was in here, classrooms, all the administration. 2 years later, right next door to our west, is Goodrich Hall, which was built as a dormitory. Now that was the very first co-ed dormitory in Wisconsin. But it was built in 2 years after this building. It used the same type of Milwaukee cream brick. So those were the 2 main buildings on campus. Later on, there was a wooden building down on College Street that was called Gents Hall, and it had kind of a crude gymnasium up on top. So they separated the men and the women probably around the mid to late 1860s. After that, then there wasn't really much building until right next door, the longtime president here, William Whitford, who was president here from 1858 until the time he passed in 1907, had a vision for building a science hall. And that science hall would include a library and lots of classrooms. And in 1907, they started building what is Whitford Hall, and it's a very substantial building, as you can see. And that is the one you just spoke about that has been renovated, and there's a coffee shop in there, and there's a fitness center. And the owners are Eric and Katie Stockman. They live upstairs with their family, rent the middle portions for commercial use.
Let's turn the clock ahead a little bit, and we go to the turn of the century. Before World War I, the campus at that point in time had probably expanded a bit beyond just these 3 buildings?
Yeah, in 1913 then, there was a vision to build a true gymnasium. So in 1913, the building that's kind of behind us here, behind these 3 buildings, was built, and it was just called the gymnasium for the longest time. In 1960, it was remodeled into the DeLand Fine Arts Center, and an auditorium was put in there, and that's where all things music and theater happened at that time.
We're in Old Main right now,
Yeah.
and this has been kind of a restoration project of love for not only you, Doug, but also for the Historic Preservation Society, and I'm guessing this is kind of one of those rooms that is a compilation of a lot of different parts of the history of the college, not the least of which you've got the College Milton Hall of Fame, which is behind us. Tell us a little bit about
That's
history
great.
here.
What we're doing right now is we're taking all of the rooms on this floor, the main floor, main hall, and we're converting them to tell a historical narrative of the history of the college. And two of the rooms that we have completed thus far, this one and the one next to us, tells the athletic history of the college. It was a pretty rich history that way. We had, football, basketball, baseball, excelled at all levels for the size of the college. What you're looking at here is the Milton College Athletic Hall of Fame. These are boards of the individuals who were inducted into the Hall of Fame. They started that about 1970, and there were people inducted within probably as long as 10 to 15 years after the college closed. But that's what this is. So we put their headshots and information, little bios on these display boards and hung them on the wall. We also, in this room, there's so many wonderful photos of college athletics down through the years, and we blew them up and put them on the walls. Kind of shows the diversity. There's women's teams here from the early 1900s, displaying the trophies and the plaques that they won and things like that.
Now, this was a co-ed institution.
Yes, oh yeah,
Okay,
correct.
it was a co-ed institution
Yeah.
for as long as it existed.
Correct, yep. One thing, it was not a Seventh-day Baptist academy per se, but it had very much Seventh-day Baptist influence that from Joseph Goodrich and the people who came here and worked under the college. And the Seventh-day Baptists believed very strongly in educating women, which not all religions, embraced at that time. It was to read the glory of God and things like that. But so when this academy opened, there were women students. And as I said, that Goodrich Hall next to us is the first co-ed dormitory in the state of Wisconsin.
Well, it's kind of funny as you look through the history of the Athletic Hall of Fame. There's some names there that are familiar to I think a lot of people. People look behind me though, and you see Dave Craig.
Yes, Dave Craig, yeah. He was
big-time quarterback with the Seattle Pilots of the Seahawks.
Seattle Seahawks. He played 19 years in the NFL.
Yeah.
But when you look,
he had his start here in Milton.
That's correct. When you look here, people come through here and they are so surprised to see the people who played their sports careers here in Milton. We have people like Ron Grosstein, who was the longtime coach at Evansville High School. We have Jack Gregory, longtime coach at Edgerton High School.
Evelyn Sayer Shale.
Yep, Evelyn. Yep.
She women's basketball, and that was back in the time before women's basketball really gained any
legitimacy.
legitimacy.
Yep, they had I want to say it was a little more than intramurals, but they didn't really play what we consider to be an intercollegiate season. They probably had about 5 or 6 games, and they played club teams and high school teams and things like that.
This is the Dave Craig corner, and he's probably one of the better known athletes to come through here. But you've got a host through the years of some major athletic competitors at the professional level.
Yes, we do. Yeah,
had their start here.
Yeah, this is Dave Crayveld, who played a year here. He's from Delavan, and he played for the Seattle Seahawks for a year. Dave Craig came here in 1976. Tough shoes to fill because in 1975 they had a 9-0 season. They were undefeated, and they had a very good quarterback by the name of Brian Blasey. Dave Craig came and got injured right off the bat. Started as a 7th-string quarterback, but by the season's end he had started the last 4 games and they won the conference championship. And then he was a 3-year starter after that and didn't set all of the school records. Ron Grosstein and Blasey have a couple of those, and a guy by the name of Joe Grafenauer. But obviously had a really good career here. And then Rudy, with his connections to with coaching and had a lot of professional connections, sent tapes like this to the Seattle Seahawks, and when you look at those tapes, you wonder how can you see anything on there. But anyway,
Coaches had great eyes.
yeah, they were impressed, and they called him on a spring day in 1980, and he went out for a tryout, and circumstances happened there where they were transitioning out of Jim Zorn, was a very well-known quarterback at the time, and Dave secured the job in 1983, took him to the AFC playoffs or championship game, and then went on to a 19-year career with Kansas City, and played for a number. At the end of his career, he played for a number of teams, including the Bears and the Detroit Lions and Tennessee Titans.
There were two significant events that affected small colleges in the 90s. One was the Vietnam War, and certainly small colleges became places where you could get admitted and qualify for a student deferment and avoid the draft and stay out of Vietnam. The other big event that happened in that period of time was Title IX, which essentially turned the world of athletics upside down, and it was the equivalent of the equal opportunity law that basically said you had to treat women's athletics in the same fashion you did men's intercollegiate athletics. Did that have an impact here at all?
At that time then, I'm not sure if it really had a financial impact, but Milton College transitioned into a couple of very good women's sports programs. Their basketball team, at their last 3 years, compiled a record of 65-24, and was considered one of the small school powerhouses in the entire region. It was coached by Brian Belize, who was the quarterback here and also coached some football. But he had a way of getting some very quality women here to come and play basketball during the late 70s. But they didn't really, in terms of financial implications, they didn't build new facilities. They just more or less shared gymnasiums, and there was women's softball here, so just kind of go to a park and play.
Yeah. Well, this was men's baseball and football school.
Basically,
in its era.
And basketball.
I was curious if the women's athletic side took off in the same sort of fashion and became...
It started to, and when you talk to Brian, he was really building something here with that basketball team. They were tremendous, and they were beating larger schools, and he was recruiting. He said he was recruiting all state players, but it's too bad that the timing worked out that program couldn't have gone another 5-10 years to see what would have happened.
It's funny because the same things that brought the beginnings of women's athletics and made small colleges thrive with enrollment ended the era of small colleges and women's athletics because the Vietnam War wound down, the draft disappeared, and suddenly you saw enrollments declining rather significantly.
This had been set up to kind of talk about the World War I veterans. So we had a substantial number of Milton College students who went to World War I. I think there's something like three to five of them were killed, either accidentally or in action. So we have muster rolls and things like that. And it actually was a booklet put out in the 1940s about all those guys. That is a wonderful resource.
Let's crank it ahead beyond the Great War to World War II, and Milton College had a role in providing soldiers in that war. In fact, I note that the enrollment of the college dropped to 53 students during World War II.
Correct, yeah.
From a peak before that of several hundred.
Yeah, and it's a very difficult time for everybody during those years, and it certainly impacted what was going on here. there were maybe 2 male students on the entire campus, and the rest, the other 45 or whatever, were female. So everybody was so involved in the war effort. And it takes some time to recover from that. You know, obviously the college didn't have the tuition money coming in. After World War II, through the GI Bill, there was a substantial number of former soldiers who came and
Get back and continued their education here.
correct.
Did the Korean War then do a bit of the same in terms of interruption of the moment?
Yeah, a little bit. You see histories of reading biographies of people that, you know, they were here and then came back after serving in Korea, things like that. Just kind of it was so fluid situation where people just kind of came and went according to what their work situation was and the military obligation.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. This was also the president's office for many years.
This room would have been, at one time I'm told, this was the president's office, got great natural lighting.
Absolutely. And a lot of memorabilia that's certainly worth some time and energy. Let's move on to another stop. Let's head upstairs to the chapel. When you mentioned, Doug, that this was a versatile building, Old Main contained everything from offices to classrooms. Remarkably, up here on the top floor, it had the chapel. Tell me a little bit about the history of the chapel.
The chapel itself is, I argue, is the most historic room in all of Milton, if not all of Rock County. This was the largest room in Milton from the time it was built in 1855 through probably about the 1880s when some of the larger churches began expanding and having larger meeting halls. So anything of importance happened in this community, pretty much happened in this room. There were anti-slavery meetings here. There were, we believe that Sojourner Truth spoke here. Lectures from all kinds of people. In the 1860s, when students were mustering into the Union Army, prior to going down to Camp Treadwell or wherever else they went, they drilled in this room.
This was a drill hall.
Correct.
Okay. Wow.
So there is a substantial amount of history that happened in here.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's go in and take a look around.
Sure.
We're in the chapel, and it would be totally out of character for me, Doug, to stand up here and go to the podium and say, my friends in... It just
Let's
would
be
be
clear.
different.
Yeah.
Let's be perfectly clear. This is another one of those rooms that just basically goes back in history. Versatile, you mentioned earlier that it was everything from a gathering point for community meetings and anti-slavery meetings to a drill hall for people mustering out to head to the army or military service.
Throughout the 1800s, they did actually have what was called chapel that started the day for the students. So it was almost like a homeroom. Everybody gathered, the bell would ring and everybody would gather here, whatever specified time. And announcements, things like that. There was probably prayers involved. And then everybody went on with their day to classes. Now later on, I'm not sure how long that tradition lasted. I would guess early 1900s, it probably just did away with the chapel part of the day. This room, even later in its history, was used as a classroom. We have some very unflattering pictures of this room having a drop ceiling and as well as Venetian blinds on these beautiful windows. But you know, the college did what it could with the space it had,
exactly.
And they were, you know, unabashed in using everything on campus to, you know, basically whittle it to whatever their needs were.
Let's crank ahead because we want to spend a little time talking about the later years of the college. I'm going to suspect that the end of the Vietnam era and the changes that made to enrollment sort of marked on the calendar. This is the beginning of the end. because it was just a few short years later that the college closed down. Um, It closed in what year?
It closed in 1982, and you're correct. After the enrollment peaks of the 1960s, then you really saw a downward spiral of enrollment here. They were facing a lot of competition from the state schools. I mean, you could go 15 miles to the east here and go to UW-Whitewater and have tremendous, better facilities, probably better course offerings. People here would argue that the type of education that you got here was equal to any of that, and I believe that. But they were fighting that. The tuition was higher than state schools, and unless you were here on a football scholarship or music scholarship, you would be better off to go to a state school.
It's interesting if you look at a history of small private colleges across the country. That era in the 70s, 80s, and into the early 90s was a time when a lot of those schools ceased to exist. They closed. And many of them just disappeared into the oblivion of a past that's lost. This, on the other hand, there was a core group of people that got together and said, let's try and preserve something of our Milton College history here. Tell me a bit about that.
So what happened when the college closed? The banks foreclosed on the entire campus. All of the buildings were locked, and the banks tried to sell the entire campus as one entity. Well, you can imagine how that went. So these buildings all sat vacant for at least a year. We have pictures of them. They're very sad pictures of the plywood over all the windows, and just they fell into, disrepair as any neglected building would over the course of a year. When the bank decided to sell them individually, they all were gobbled up really quickly by private entrepreneurs who did a lot of restoration.
And at this point in time, there were 12 or 13 buildings that were still
Correct.
in existence.
13
and
buildings.
that campus ranged from here on the far end of the campus to across High Street.
Across High Street.
And there you had the newest gymnasium and new dormitories and a few classrooms.
Yep, there were 4 dormitories over there, 4 large dormitories, and they were remodeled into apartments, very nice apartments from what I understand. The campus building over there is an office building. Rudy Gadini still sells insurance in there. The Dunn Athletic Center probably has the most interesting post-college history in that for a while it was the largest antiques mall in southern Wisconsin. Did a thriving business. It was, and it was perfectly set up for that with the tiers of from the balconies and things like that. They could set up kiosks of vendors and things like that. Now this building, within that year there was a Milton College Alumni Association formed, and there was also the Main Hall Preservation Society, 2 separate entities. The bank agreed to sell this building for $1 to the Main Hall Preservation Society. And the Alumni Association kind of operated on its own, but kept alumni very involved, a very thriving group. A lot of the alumni were still around, and this place held were very near and dear to their hearts. So after those 2 entities eventually merged in the 2000s, and now you have what is called the Milton College Preservation Society. We still have a base of about 500 alumni members who are on our mailing list. There's a lot more out there, but we send material every other month to. I created a magazine that is our alumni newsletter, which I explore a lot of history and pictures and things like that. We send about 500 of those out every other month. I print it. So we have a very interested group that wants to preserve this building. Yeah. Now this bell that you're going to hear right now was installed by the College Preservation Society in mid-1990s or so. The original bell is over in the corner. That is one of the items that the bank they went up into the bell tower and took the bell out. And they put that down on the lawn, and it was auctioned off. It came back to us only not too long ago, probably about 7 or 8 years ago. But we have the
working bell.
Working bell, and every time we ring it, they love it over at Charlotte's Coffee and every place else.
Well, every time the bell rings.
That's right, Angel gets his wings. I saw that in a movie somewhere.
It's funny how the community comes forward at those points in time where you put out that all call that says if you have memorabilia or you have something out there that would bring back a bit of the college. Suddenly, this is the original bell for this chapel, correct?
That is correct. This bell was forged in 1867 in a foundry in Cincinnati. What happened in 1867 is that an expansion addition was put on to this building, to the original 1855 building. And part of that expansion was they built the bell tower. So prior to 1867, there was not a bell tower. This is the bell that was used through the lifetime of the college. The banks, at their time when they foreclosed, they took everything that was not nailed down, including the bell. They went up in the bell tower, got it out of there, and put it on the lawn and auctioned it off.
And so piece by piece.
That's correct.
Yeah.
We were very fortunate that a local family purchased the bell, and they stored it for, God.
I was going to say that begs the question, what does a local family do with a bell of this size? That's a big bell to use as a supper bell.
Yeah, right. It basically sat in somebody's shed for until about 2017, I think, is when we got it back.
But it's a wonderful gift to bring back.
It was.
To the building. That takes me to the next big project that Milton College Preservation Society has on their sites. You want to add an elevator to the building to make it fully accessible to all individuals, correct?
That is correct. We have, being an old building, you have those accessibility issues that just weren't even thought of or even made possible at the time that they were built. We have a very nice space downstairs, which is a lounge area and a kitchen and things like that. That's where the restrooms are. So when you're up here, we are 2 flights up from the lower level. And if you have an event here, whether it's a conference or a wedding or a recital or any other event, you have to utilize the restrooms, you have to go down 2 flights of stairs and cross the building twice to get there. What we want to do, our vision is to make this building more usable for generations to come. And in doing so, we have to make it more accessible.
Certainly.
And an elevator that would connect the very lower level with this level is a key component of that vision.
Does that include restrooms on this floor as well?
There are not restrooms.
There are no plans without restrooms on this floor.
No.
So
Yep.
it'll just be a little easier to get to them via the elevator.
Yep.
Okay.
Hey Dwayne, check this out. It's a little brief article about the chapel that Rich and Doug were just in.
It's been a wonderful time to take a quick look at some of the progress you've made, Doug, in bringing history alive again here in the Milton College campus. If I am a viewer and have an interest in contacting Doug Welsh at Milton College, what's the protocol?
Well, we invite anybody to become a member of the Milton College Preservation Society. Along with that membership will come a magazine every other month, 6 times a year, and you can learn all about the history of the college through that magazine. But the best way to do that is to give us a call here at Main Hall at 608-868-2354.
Is there an email address they can contact you as well?
Yes.
And do you have a social media presence?
We do have a Facebook page too that's called The Spirit Lives, and it's for Milton College alumni, but anybody can view it and join it. And we post a lot of pictures on there. And my email here at Milton College is doug@miltoncollegesociety.com. And that's all one word, all lowercase.
Excellent. I guess a closing comment, and we can go on and do a bit more in private with our exploration of the history of Milton College. So in closing, I guess all we can say is Milton College, go Wildcats.
Go Wildcats. Go Cats.